The year is 1861. The United States, a nation founded on the ideals of liberty and equality, finds itself on the brink of a catastrophic war. The issue of slavery, a festering wound on the soul of the nation since its inception, has finally reached a boiling point. For decades, the Southern states, with their economies deeply intertwined with slave labor, had clashed with the abolitionist North. The election of Abraham Lincoln, a man who had declared a house divided against itself cannot stand in regards to slavery, proved to be the breaking point. Lincoln's victory sent shockwaves through the South. Southern leaders saw Lincoln's election as an existential threat to their way of life, a harbinger of the end of their economic and political dominance. The institution of slavery, they argued, was not merely an economic necessity, but a cornerstone of their social fabric. The divide between North and South ran deep, splitting families and communities. On one side stood the Union, committed to preserving the nation and confronting the moral abomination of slavery. On the other, the newly formed Confederate States of America, determined to defend their sovereignty and their right to self-determination, even at the cost of war. The stage was set for one of the bloodiest conflicts in human history, a brother-against-brother struggle that would test the very fabric of the nation. The coming storm loomed large, casting a long shadow over the land. Americans, North and South, prepared for the inevitable. They would soon learn the true cost of freedom and the enduring legacy of slavery. With Lincoln's inauguration in March 1861, the Southern states began to make good on their threats of secession. South Carolina led the way, followed by Mississippi, Florida, Alabama, Georgia, Louisiana, and Texas. These 7 states formed the Confederate States of America, electing Jefferson Davis as their president. They were soon joined by Virginia, Arkansas, North Carolina, and Tennessee, bringing the total number of Confederate states to 11. The secession of the Southern states was a direct challenge to the authority of the federal government. Lincoln, in his inaugural address, declared secession illegal and vowed to preserve the Union. He argued that the Constitution created a more perfect union that could not be dissolved by the unilateral actions of individual states. The first shots of the Civil War were fired on April 12, 1861, at Fort Sumter in Charleston, South Carolina. Confederate forces bombarded the federal fort, forcing its surrender. The attack on Fort Sumter galvanized the North, uniting them behind Lincoln and the cause of preserving the Union. The war was on. The nation, once united by common bonds of liberty and shared dreams, was now fractured. The Mason-Dixon line, once a symbolic divide between North and South, now represented a tangible battle line. The idyllic notion of a peaceful separation was shattered, replaced by the harsh realities of war. The early days of the Civil War were marked by a sense of naive optimism on both sides. Many believed the conflict would be short-lived, a matter of a few decisive battles. The reality, however, proved far more brutal and protracted. The first major battle of the war took place on July 21, 1861, at Manassas Junction, Virginia, near a small creek called Bull Run. Confederate forces, led by General P.G.T. Beauregard, routed the Union Army, shattering the illusion of a swift Union victory. The Battle of Bull Run exposed the inadequacies of both armies, unprepared for the realities of large-scale warfare. As the war dragged on, the strategies of both sides evolved. The Union, with its superior industrial capacity and manpower, adopted a strategy of attrition, aiming to wear down the Confederacy through a combination of naval blockades, economic sanctions, and sustained military pressure. The Confederacy, on the other hand, adopted a defensive strategy, hoping to repel Union advances and secure foreign recognition through a war of attrition. The human cost of the war was becoming increasingly apparent. Battlefields, once serene landscapes, were transformed into scenes of unimaginable carnage. The cries of the wounded and dying echoed across the land, a stark reminder of the brutality of war. Families, North and South, were torn apart by grief as casualty lists grew longer with each passing battle. As the war entered its second year, the moral dimension of the conflict came into sharper focus. Abolitionists in the North had long urged Lincoln to strike at the heart of the Confederacy by emancipating the slaves. Lincoln, however, hesitated, fearing that such a move would alienate border states loyal to the Union. However, Lincoln recognized the strategic importance of emancipation. By freeing the slaves in Confederate-held territory, he could undermine the Confederacy's economic and military strength. Moreover, he believed that a war fought to preserve the Union must also be a war to advance the cause of freedom. On January 1, 1863, Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation, declaring that all slaves in areas under Confederate control shall be then, thenceforward, and forever free. The Emancipation Proclamation was a watershed moment in American history, marking a turning point in the war and a significant step towards the abolition of slavery. The Emancipation Proclamation had a profound impact on both the course of the war and the lives of millions of African Americans. It transformed the war from a struggle to preserve the Union into a fight for human freedom. It also opened the door for African Americans to serve in the Union Army and Navy, playing a crucial role in the Union's ultimate victory. The Emancipation Proclamation, however, did not end slavery in the United States. It applied only to Confederate states in rebellion, not to border states that had remained loyal to the Union. The fight to abolish slavery entirely would continue long after the Civil War ended.